Stop. Before you keep scrolling, I need you to hear one sentence that every urologist knows and almost none of us say out loud in public. The reason your erections weakened, the real clinical reason, has nothing to do with how old you are. It has a specific medical name. It is measurable. It is documented in peer-reviewed literature. And most importantly, it is reversible through a very specific combination of compounds that work together on the exact mechanism responsible for the problem. I am not talking about one ingredient. I am not talking about a supplement. I am talking about a precise stacking protocol, 3 combinations, taken in a specific sequence, that addresses the complete vascular picture of erectile function in men over 50. My name is Dr. Mei Anderson. I am a board-certified urologist with over 20 years of clinical practice specializing exclusively in senior men's sexual health. And what I am sharing in this video is the distilled knowledge from 2 decades of sitting across from men who tried everything and finally understood why nothing fully worked, until they understood this. Stay with me to the end, because the most important piece, the one that separates men who get real results from men who stay frustrated, comes last. And by the time we get there, everything I explain between now and then will make complete sense in a way that no other video on this topic ever has. Let me tell you what most men believe is happening when erections start to fail. They believe their testosterone dropped. They believe they are getting older, and this is simply what older looks like. They believe the machinery is worn out. Some of them have gone to their doctor, had their testosterone checked, been told their levels are completely normal, and walked out of that office more confused and more hopeless than when they walked in. I see this pattern every single week in my practice. Good men. Healthy men. Men who exercise, watch what they eat, do everything right, and still cannot understand why their body stopped responding the way it used to. Here is the clinical truth that changes everything. The vast majority of men I treat, men in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, do not have a testosterone problem. They have a delivery problem. Think of it this way. Imagine a city with a fully functioning power station producing electricity at complete capacity. But the transmission lines running through certain neighborhoods have become narrowed, coated with buildup, and stiffened over years of chronic inflammation. The power exists. The generator is running. But the lights in those specific neighborhoods are dim or completely dark. Not because the generator failed, but because the lines can no longer carry what the generator is producing. That is precisely what happens inside the penis when vascular endothelial dysfunction sets in. The endothelium is the thin cellular lining inside your blood vessels. In the penile arteries specifically, this lining is responsible for producing a molecule called nitric oxide. The biological signal that tells the smooth muscle in your arterial walls to relax, dilate, and allow blood to rush into the erectile tissue with the force and volume required for a full, sustained erection. When the endothelium is inflamed, stiffened, and damaged, which happens progressively in men after 50 due to chronic low-grade inflammation, oxidative stress, and declining antioxidant capacity, nitric oxide production collapses. And when nitric oxide collapses, erections fail. Not because you are old, because the lining is damaged. And damaged linings can heal. That is what this entire video is about. Before I go any further, I want to ask you one question. And I genuinely want your answer in the comments below, because I am going to come back to it at the end of this video with a specific clinical answer for you personally. Have you ever tried something for this? A food, a supplement, a drink, something you read about or watched a video about? And it worked for a few weeks and then stopped? Or has nothing worked at all? Type the number 1 in the comments if something worked briefly then faded. Type the number 2 if nothing has worked at all. Post it now and keep watching, because the answer to why that happened to you specifically is coming before this video ends. Now let me give you the structure of what we are covering today, because understanding the structure is half the clinical insight itself. There are 3 distinct mechanisms involved in producing and sustaining a strong erection. Most content you have ever watched on this topic addresses only one of them. A few address 2. Almost nothing addresses all 3 simultaneously. And that is the precise reason men get partial results, or results that fade and leave them more demoralized than before they started. I call these the 3 gates. The first gate is what I call the inflammation gate. This is the endothelial lining problem I just described. Until this gate is opened, meaning until the chronic inflammation suppressing your vascular lining is actively addressed, nothing you do to increase nitric oxide will have its full effect. You cannot push current through a damaged wire no matter how much power you generate at the source. The gate must come first. The second gate is the nitric oxide engine. This is the production and protection of the nitric oxide molecule itself. Most approaches only try to boost production. What they miss is that nitric oxide has an extremely short lifespan inside the bloodstream. It degrades within seconds under oxidative stress. Producing more means nothing if you are not simultaneously protecting what is produced. You need a dual-action approach here, and I will show you exactly what that looks like. The third gate is what I call the retention factor. This is the piece that virtually no one talks about, and it is responsible for a specific pattern of dysfunction that millions of men experience but cannot name. An erection is not just about blood flowing in. It is about blood being held in. When this mechanism is compromised, blood enters but drains too quickly, producing the experience of an erection that starts and then fades, or that feels insufficiently firm even when arousal is complete. Addressing this gate changes that specific pattern in a way that nothing else touches. 3 gates, 3 combinations, 1 specific sequence for taking them across the day. Let us go through each one. The first combination targets the endothelial lining directly. It reduces the chronic vascular inflammation suppressing your body's ability to produce nitric oxide, and it begins restoring the structural flexibility of the arterial walls themselves. The combination is curcumin, black pepper extract, and extra virgin olive oil. Now before you tell yourself you have heard about turmeric before, and it did not do much, stay with me, because the reason this combination produces genuine clinical results when turmeric alone produces almost nothing comes down to a pharmacokinetic reality that most people explaining this completely overlook. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, is what researchers call poorly bioavailable in isolation. What that means in plain language is that when you consume it by itself, your gut absorbs a negligible fraction before the rest is metabolized and eliminated. Multiple studies have confirmed that standard curcumin consumption produces barely detectable blood levels. This is why men who add turmeric to their food feel nothing. They are not absorbing enough for it to do meaningful work. But when you combine it correctly, absorption increases by over 2,000%. Piperine, the active compound in black pepper, inhibits the specific liver enzyme responsible for breaking down curcumin before it can enter circulation. It essentially disables the elimination pathway, allowing curcumin to survive long enough to reach the bloodstream in concentrations capable of doing real work. Extra virgin olive oil, specifically cold-pressed, high polyphenol olive oil, provides the fat matrix that curcumin requires for intestinal absorption. Because curcumin is fat-soluble and cannot cross the intestinal wall without a fat carrier regardless of how much piperine you add. Together these 3 compounds function as a single integrated delivery system. The olive oil opens the intestinal door. The piperine locks the elimination pathway closed. And curcumin enters the bloodstream at the concentrations required to do what the research shows it is capable of doing. What it does inside the vascular endothelium is clinically significant. Curcumin at therapeutic concentrations has been shown in peer-reviewed research to downregulate NF-κB, the master inflammatory signaling pathway responsible for much of the chronic low-grade inflammation damaging the vascular lining in men over 50. It also directly upregulates eNOS, endothelial nitric oxide synthase, the enzyme your arterial lining uses to produce nitric oxide. It is not just anti-inflammatory. It is directly pro-erectile at the endothelial level. It is repairing the wire while simultaneously improving the wire's conductivity. The practical protocol for this combination is 1 teaspoon of high-quality turmeric powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper, and 1 tablespoon of extra virgin cold-pressed olive oil. Mix these together and consume them with your largest meal of the day, ideally lunch or dinner, never on an empty stomach. Do not cook this mixture at high heat. Add it to food after cooking or stir it into a warm but not boiling liquid. because high heat degrades piperine's enzyme-inhibiting activity and reduces the absorption advantage this combination is built on. One more thing about this combination that I need you to hear, because it directly affects your timeline. This gate does not open overnight. Clinical studies on curcumin and vascular endothelial function show meaningful improvements in endothelial flexibility and inflammatory marker reduction beginning around the 14 to 21 day mark with consistent daily use. If you take this for 3 days and feel nothing dramatic, that is completely expected. You are building the structural foundation. You are repairing the transmission line before you run the current. Stay consistent. The next combination is where you begin to feel the difference, but only because this one opened the door for it. The second combination is the nitric oxide engine. And this is where most men want to start, which is exactly the sequencing error that explains why so many men get inconsistent results from these ingredients when they try them on their own. If you begin with nitric oxide support before addressing the inflammatory damage to the endothelium, you are attempting to run current through a damaged wire. Some signal gets through. Results feel inconsistent. Erections improve partially but not fully. The effect fades within hours because the underlying damage continues to suppress baseline production between doses. Open the gate first. Then fuel the engine. The nitric oxide engine combination uses two sources working on two completely different production pathways simultaneously. Source 1 is dietary nitrates from raw beetroot or fresh cold-pressed beet juice. Source 2 is flavonols from pure unsweetened cacao. Here is why the combination is necessary and why single-source approaches consistently underperform. Dietary nitrates follow what is called the enterosalivary nitric oxide pathway. When you consume concentrated nitrates, they are absorbed from the gut into the bloodstream, secreted into saliva by the salivary glands, where specific oral bacteria convert them from nitrate to nitrite. That nitrite is swallowed, enters the stomach, and is converted by stomach acid into nitric oxide, which enters circulation and acts on smooth muscle in the arterial walls. This pathway is highly efficient. Clinical research shows that a single serving of concentrated beet juice raises circulating nitrite levels, the immediate precursor to nitric oxide, by over 200% within 90 minutes. But here is the problem that single-source beetroot users consistently run into. Nitric oxide in the bloodstream is extremely vulnerable to oxidative stress. It reacts with superoxide, a free radical that is chronically elevated in men over 50 due to declining antioxidant enzyme activity, and forms a damaging compound that destroys the nitric oxide you just produced while simultaneously harming the vascular endothelium. You are producing nitric oxide and losing it almost as fast as you make it. The production is happening. The protection is missing. This is where cacao flavonols complete the engine. The specific flavonols in pure unsweetened cacao, particularly a compound called epicatechin, have been extensively studied for their ability to directly activate enos through a calcium-dependent signaling pathway. But more critically for this combination, epicatechin is one of the most potent natural scavengers of the exact free radical that destroys your newly produced nitric oxide. It neutralizes superoxide before it can react with and eliminate what your beet intake just generated. One produces, the other preserves. Together they create a sustained nitric oxide effect that is meaningfully greater than either could produce working alone. The practical protocol is 8 ounces of fresh cold-pressed beet juice with no added sugar, not canned, not cooked, because heat significantly reduces nitrate content, combined with 1 tablespoon of pure raw cacao powder, not cocoa powder, which is processed at high heat and loses a significant percentage of its flavonol content. Raw cacao specifically. It must be completely unsweetened because adding sugar directly suppresses enos activity through an insulin-mediated mechanism and will partially undo the vascular effect you are building. Now I need to tell you something about this combination that will genuinely surprise you. And if you get this wrong, it can reduce the effectiveness of this entire protocol by up to 90%. This single detail separates the men who say this approach changed their life from the men who tried it, felt nothing and gave up. Do not use antibacterial mouthwash on the same day you take this combination. The nitrate to nitrite conversion that produces your nitric oxide precursor depends entirely on specific bacterial species living on the surface of your tongue and in the folds of your throat. Antibacterial mouthwash eliminates these bacteria completely. Multiple clinical studies, including research published in the journal Free Radical Biology and Medicine, have confirmed that using chlorhexidine mouthwash abolishes the nitric oxide benefits of dietary nitrate consumption entirely. You consume the beet juice. Your body absorbs the nitrate. Your salivary glands secrete it into your mouth. And the bacteria that were supposed to convert it to nitrite are gone. The nitrate passes through your system completely unused, and you feel nothing. This single piece of information explains more failed attempts at this approach than almost anything else I have encountered in 20 years of clinical practice. Write it down. Share it with someone you know who has tried beet juice and been disappointed. Take this combination in the morning before eating, when stomach acid concentration is highest, and the final nitrate conversion step is most efficient. The effect peaks at approximately 90 minutes, and sustains for 3 to 4 hours. For men who want a specific pre-intimacy effect, a second smaller half dose taken 90 minutes beforehand compounds the morning baseline significantly. The third combination addresses the gate that nobody talks about, and it is the most important piece for a specific group of men watching this right now. The men who experience erections that start but do not sustain, that fade during activity, or that feel insufficiently firm even when arousal and desire are completely present. If that description fits your experience, what I am about to explain will be the first clinical framework that accurately describes what is actually happening in your body. The retention factor addresses the venous occlusion side of erectile physiology, a mechanism completely absent from nearly every conversation about men's sexual health online. Here is the clinical picture. The penis contains two cylindrical chambers called the corpora cavernosa. When they fill with blood under arterial pressure, they expand. As they expand, they compress the veins running along the outside of these chambers. This is called the veno-occlusive mechanism. When this compression is effective, blood is trapped inside the chambers and rigidity is maintained. When it is insufficient, when the smooth muscle tissue responsible for that compression has lost tone, blood continues to drain even as more arrives. The erection begins but cannot sustain itself. More arterial blood flow does not solve this problem. That is like filling a bucket with a hole in the bottom faster. The hole is still there. The smooth muscle tissue responsible for this compression loses tone progressively with age, chronic inflammation, and, critically, zinc and magnesium depletion, both of which are nearly universal in men over 50 and directly affect smooth muscle contractile function throughout the pelvic region. The third combination addresses this through 3 specific compounds. Pumpkin seed, which is zinc-rich, magnesium-rich, and contains a specific lignin compound that in multiple studies has shown direct effects on smooth muscle tone in pelvic floor tissue. L-citrulline, found in highest concentration in watermelon, specifically the white rind that almost every man discards without knowing he is throwing away the most therapeutically valuable part of the fruit. And cold-pressed pumpkin seed oil, which contains delta-7 sterols shown in urological research to support androgen receptor sensitivity in pelvic smooth muscle tissue, independent of testosterone levels. Let me explain why the watermelon rind matters specifically. L-citrulline is a precursor to L-arginine, which is itself the direct raw material your eNOS enzyme uses to produce nitric oxide. You might ask why not simply consume L-arginine directly. The clinical reason is this. Orally consumed L-arginine is heavily metabolized by an enzyme called arginase in the gut wall before it reaches circulation, meaning absorption is poor and highly inconsistent. L-citrulline completely bypasses this degradation pathway, converts to L-arginine in the kidneys with high efficiency, and raises plasma L-arginine concentrations more reliably than L-arginine supplementation itself. Multiple clinical trials confirm superior outcomes with citrulline for this exact application. And the rind of watermelon contains 10 times the citrulline concentration of the red flesh. 10 times. Most men eat the flesh, discard the rind, and wonder why watermelon did not do what they heard it was supposed to do. The practical protocol is 1 ounce of raw pumpkin seeds dried at low temperature. Not roasted above 300 degrees because higher heat oxidizes the beneficial lipids and reduces delta-7 sterol content. 1 cup of fresh watermelon blended with the white rind fully included. 1 teaspoon of cold-pressed pumpkin seed oil stirred in after blending. Take this combination in the evening approximately 1 hour before sleep. The clinical rationale is direct. The body's natural testosterone surge occurs during REM sleep, beginning approximately 90 minutes into the sleep cycle. Testosterone directly supports smooth muscle tone in the corpora cavernosa. When you provide the smooth muscle with the substrate it needs, zinc, magnesium, delta-7 sterols, and elevated citrulline-derived L-arginine, in the window immediately preceding this testosterone surge, the tissue has the nutritional resources available exactly when the hormonal signal to use them arrives. The morning erections that healthy men experience are a direct clinical measure of this overnight vascular repair cycle functioning correctly. When men in my practice tell me their morning erections have returned after beginning this protocol, that is the specific signal I look for. It tells me the retention mechanism is being restored. If what I have shared with you today has given you a clinical framework you have never encountered before, if the 3-gate picture makes sense of experiences and disappointments you could not previously explain, I want to ask you to subscribe to Vital Health Seniors right now. This channel exists to give men over 50 the clinical depth they deserve on the topics that matter most. I release a new evidence-based protocol every single week. Subscribing takes 3 seconds and costs nothing. And it means the next time you need this level of detail on a men's health topic, you do not have to search for it. It finds you. Now let me give you the 4 factors that determine whether your results from this protocol are good or genuinely exceptional. Men who understand all 4 get the best outcomes. Most men know none of them. The first is sleep. The overnight testosterone surge I described occurs specifically during slow-wave sleep, stages 3 and 4 of the sleep cycle. Research published in the Journal of the American Medical Association demonstrated that men sleeping 5 hours per night for 1 week showed testosterone levels equivalent to men 10 years their senior. This protocol gives your body the materials for vascular repair. Sleep gives it the construction window. Without 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep, you are stocking the shelves of a store that never opens. The most actionable sleep change the research consistently supports is room temperature. Sleeping in a room cooled to between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit measurably increases slow-wave sleep duration. This is free. It requires nothing but adjusting a thermostat before bed. The second factor is pelvic circulation. Men who sit for more than 6 hours per day experience progressive compression of the pudendal artery, the primary blood supply to the external genitalia. Over years this chronic compression contributes directly to the baseline reduction in penile circulation that accelerates endothelial dysfunction. The correction is 10 minutes of moderate pace walking after each meal, 3 times per day. This generates rhythmic contraction of the pelvic floor muscles, and restores arterial flow to the region in a way a single longer exercise session cannot replicate, because the benefit comes from frequency throughout the day, not duration in one block. The third factor is the alcohol interaction with this protocol. Ethanol directly suppresses enos activity through an oxidative mechanism involving its metabolite acetaldehyde. This suppression occurs at even moderate consumption levels and persists for 12 to 24 hours after drinking. Men who consume 2 or more standard drinks on an evening when they took the nitric oxide engine combination that morning are partially neutralizing the effect they built. I am not prescribing abstinence. I am giving you the clinical timeline so you can make informed decisions about the relationship between evening drinking and the following morning's vascular function. The fourth factor is morning sunlight. Ultraviolet light from natural morning sunlight triggers the release of nitric oxide stored in skin tissue through a photochemical reaction completely independent of the dietary nitrate pathway. 15 to 20 minutes of morning sunlight on the arms and face produces a measurable increase in circulating nitric oxide that directly compounds the effect of the morning combination. This was documented in research published in the Journal of Investigative Dermatology. It requires no equipment, no cost, and nothing more than stepping outside while you prepare your morning beet and cacao combination. The 2 nitric oxide pathways together dietary and photochemical, are additive. Now I want to come back to the question I asked you at the beginning of this video, because I promised you a specific clinical answer based on your number. If you typed the number 1, something worked for a while, and then stopped. Here is exactly what was happening in your body. You were addressing one gate without addressing the others. Most likely you found something that engaged the nitric oxide production pathway, beat citrulline, something in that category, and it worked because the nitric oxide engine responded. You felt real improvement. But the inflammation gate was never opened, and the chronic endothelial damage continued suppressing your baseline between doses. Over 2 to 4 weeks, the cumulative inflammatory damage caught up with the boosting effect, and the results faded. Your missing piece is combination 1. Begin there. Build the endothelial foundation. The results you experienced before will return. And this time they will sustain because the lining that was undermining them is being repaired simultaneously. If you type the number 2, nothing has worked at all. The clinical picture is almost always a combination of sequencing failure and an unaddressed retention problem. You tried things individually, in no particular order, without understanding that each one addresses a different gate. Everything you tried may have been the correct ingredient for its specific mechanism, but applied to the wrong gate at the wrong time without the others supporting it. The complete 3 combination protocol in the correct daily sequence is your starting point. All 3 gates. The correct order. 7 days of full consistency before you make any judgment about effectiveness. Give your body the complete signal for the first time, not a partial one. Go back and post your number in the comments now if you have not already. And if someone you know is dealing with this in silence. Because most men are, and most men never tell anyone they are looking for answers. Share this video with them. Your share might be the thing that reaches a man who has quietly accepted something he never should have accepted. What I have shown you today is not a collection of ingredients. It is a complete clinical framework built on the specific vascular physiology of men over 50, the inflammation gate, the nitric oxide engine, the retention factor, 3 combinations, 1 sequence, 1 week of full commitment before you assess. None of this requires a prescription. None of it requires a clinic visit. All of it is available at a grocery store for less than you would spend on a single dinner out. The men who get the best results from this do not try it for 2 days and quit. They do not take combination 2 and skip combination 1 because it sounded less exciting. They do not run the sequence backwards because the evening combination seemed easier to start. They follow the protocol completely, for 7 days. And on day 8, they understand why every word I said on day 1 mattered. Your vascular health is not a mystery. It is not an inevitable consequence of being your age. It is a set of mechanisms, measurable, documented, and responsive to the right inputs delivered in the right order. Tonight start with the inflammation gate. Curcumin, black pepper, and olive oil with your dinner. That is your first step. Not the most dramatic. Not the one you will feel immediately, but the one that makes everything else work. The wire goes in before the current. Do that tonight. Come back to this channel next week and build from there. I am Dr. Mei Anderson. This is Vital Health Seniors, and I will see you in the next video. If this gave you something your doctor's 15-minute appointment never did, hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells YouTube that this level of clinical depth deserves to reach more men who need it. Share it with one man you know who is quietly dealing with this. And leave your number, 1 or 2, in the comments if you have not posted it yet. Your body built these mechanisms once. It remembers how. Give it the right inputs in the right order. And watch what it does.